Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and we have a Christmas message for you today. But before we get to that, you probably know by now that we're on a boat. And furthermore, I've been looking at the latest sales figures, and we're going to need a bigger boat.
Whoa!
So if you would like to join all of the people who share the same values as you do and just have a wonderful, relaxed, good time out there in May on the high seas, although not too high, we're not going to be that far. We'd love to have you go to BillWhittleCruise.com and join us. We've always enjoyed meeting the people who are fans of the show, who watch the show. And more than anything, we'd love to get a chance to meet you, talk with you, and get you a little armored up just emotionally, because it's going to be an election year, and you know what that means. Anyway, on to Christmas. Gentlemen, a couple nights ago, I was trimming the tree with my lovely wife, and needless to say, I was looking for some Christmas music, so I go to YouTube and I put on Christmas carols, and you get something like 93 hours of Christmas carols with a roaring fireplace. And we listen to Christmas carols, and we listen to, Jingle Bells, and we listen to Blue Christmas and all that. I said, I want something Dickens, I want Dickensian, I want something with some. So we poked around, and we quickly found a series of traditional Christmas carols sung by King's College choir in Cambridge, and it was sung in a cathedral.
Oh.
And I was listening to this and looking at it, and that's when my Christmas message hit me. I don't know how a society can continue when it cuts itself off from its own roots, when it literally almost like circumscribes its own bark and then thinks that somehow it can continue to live. I was looking at this cathedral. I was listening to this music, and I was looking at the architecture and the stained glass windows and the purity of the voices and the delicacy of the sound. And I said to myself, in a pleasant way, not in a kind of hey, USA kind of way. It's like, is there anything on the earth to compare with this? Is there anything to compare with this? And I couldn't think of anything. I could not think of anything that could compare to that. And that's when I realized that the entire purpose of the people that don't like us, well, whoever they may be, they understand the power and the strength that we have, and they understand that the only way to beat us, the only way to make us go away, is to disconnect us from that power and that strength. So, Steve, let's start with you. I'm looking at this. I'm hearing this voices, all boy choir. Undoubtedly, that's on the list. But just the purity of the sound and the just the magnificence of the architecture. And I'm looking at it, I'm listening, and I'm thinking, I think that Christianity were the first people to figure out that you could make this room a lot bigger looking if you put the braces on the outside instead of on the inside. We'll have flying buttresses.
Yep.
And I have just realized during that time I was listening to this music, Steve, just how trained I've become to hate and loathe and despise this magnificence, and how we're trained on a daily basis to say that, this is no different or better than anything else, and to just generally mock the majesty of it as something, we've outgrown that.
Yeah, boy, I hope not. I have to tell you, I'm watching the rebuilding, if you can call it that, at this early stage of the Notre Dame with great interest. You think about when that cathedral was built. What was it, the 1100s? So I guess the 12th century, and it took 60 or 70 years to
much more than that, hundreds of years
to finish building the thing. Well, I'm talking about the main structure. I want to say it was 60 to 80 years, somewhere in there. And you think about our attention span. You go back 70 or 80 years, you're talking about the Second World War, and that generation is almost gone now. The greatest generation, it's almost gone. And to us, it seems like ancient history. When the French were building the Notre Dame, it was an ongoing project for that length of time. That sort of thing requires a cultural devotion, not just religious, but a cultural devotion to a thing, and to the idea that thing represents. And it's an amazing thing. The cathedral has stood this entire time. It's been cared for this entire time, and it was built as a tribute to the magnificence of Western religion and Western culture at a time when Western culture was civilization was at a real ebb. Islam was rising. The borders of Europe were being nibbled at in the safest areas. It was a very dark and difficult time, and that cathedral represented a lot. And Bill, what you were saying earlier about the music reminded me of something. You guys probably know, I'm not sure our members or viewers know how obsessive I am about building smart playlists for my music library. And let me put it this way. I've got a 2-screen setup here, and one screen is devoted to iTunes, or now the music app. And I'm on it all the time, just fine tuning, tweaking. Playlists are built out of keywords. They're built out of genres, years, star ratings. I've got nested playlists that build upon each other to keep the music rotation going exactly the way I like it. It's all very insane. But I pulled up my folder. I have a folder just for Christmas playlists. And there are different Christmas playlists for all kinds of things. One of my favorites, it's called Snazzy Christmas, and that's got your Lou Rawls, your Wynton Marsalis, your Brian Setzer Orchestra, your Ella Fitzgerald, your Louis Armstrong, just your snazzy, jazzy Christmas stuff, and I love it. But the thing you have to remember, in this country anyway, we actually have 2 Christmases. The first Christmas, the important Christmas, is the high Christian holiday celebrating the birth of Christ. You can't get over that. If you forget that, then you've forgotten everything. But in this country, we also have a very secular holiday that I like to think of as the Christmas season. And I wish it still began the day after Thanksgiving. But, the decorations are going up in October now, and that's a damn shame. But I'm looking at my various Christmas playlists, and I sort through them based on mood or whatever. But on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, it's always the religious playlist that plays. It's the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. It's the Wexford Carolers and all the rest. And I still, despite struggles, have not found faith myself. But that is one of my connections to this ancient, noble, and holy thing. And we can't forget that, Bill. We just can't.
Scotty, I'd like you to see if you can help some people out here. People who, like me, spent most of our lives thinking, Christmas is about Santa Claus. And before anybody says, "Hey, don't knock Santa Claus," let me just say that American Christmas, the sort of the non-religious Santa Claus Christmas, I think is responsible for 90% of the happiness in this country. I think American Christmas is a magnificent, unbelievably great thing to do to children, for children, and about children. I think this business of the jolly old elf and trees magically appearing or toys rather, and sliding down chimneys, and the milk, is here because the milk's been drunk, and the cookie's been eaten. I think it's absolutely responsible for fundamental happiness in America. I think it's a magnificent thing. But lately, and especially this last a couple nights ago, I looked at this and listened to this music, and I thought about the number of years that this music has been sung. Some of it was sung in Latin. I looked at the inside of that cathedral and the audience sitting there, and I thought of the millions of people who've sat in that cathedral over hundreds of years, over a millennia, really, practically. And Steve was onto something that I thought was really important, and that is that cathedrals were built all throughout Europe, and they are phenomenally expensive things to build. They're aircraft carriers for the time. And it's almost like every little town in America, like Shreveport, Louisiana had to build an aircraft carrier, a nuclear aircraft carrier for the good of the country. People don't understand the sacrifice that went into this, the kind of material sacrifice and the commitment. Centuries. We're going to start a work that's not going to be completed for centuries. And what compelled them to do it was a sense of religious faith and a belief in something that is more important than their lives out there, with the lovely filth down here, Dennis. So can you possibly help people who don't have any particular religious feelings connect to the importance of that kind of primacy of just God in their daily lives and the miraculous, not only the miraculous things that they built, but the confidence that it engendered and how that confidence laid the foundation for everything that followed, including walking on the moon, where Buzz Aldrin, had himself a mass as soon as the rocket engine was shut down.
He did communion.
Beg pardon.
It's fascinating because all of these majestic temples, or most of these majestic temples, are built in honor of a God who declares in his word that he does not dwell in temples built by human hands. And it is really kind of a magnificent irony. And yet humans are always trying to find a way to express their joy in the presence of this God. And sometimes that happens at Christmas time as we sing the songs that you guys were talking about. And sometimes it happens in acts of human kindness where we volunteer our time, or as my daughter, goes to live in a jungle, in a hut, to be able to reach other people in the name of Christ. And there are a variety of ways that we express that. And some of it is done in architecture and construction and these, magnificent cathedrals. And yet, not only does God tell us that he doesn't dwell in temples built by human hands, but he says something even more strange, I think, is that our own bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit. In essence, that he comes to live with us. It is the Christmas songs you've heard that use the term Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God with us. And it is the most peculiar thing of the Christian religion that the scriptures declare that there is a God who is not out there sitting on a cloud with a long gray beard, holding a scepter in his hand and demanding fealty and strict obedience from us. But rather, he is a God that came in human flesh, that suffered as we do, that walked around on calloused feet, that ate the same low, gruel that the rest of his followers had to eat, who suffered incredible pain, who died on a cross, who, all of these indignities were rained upon. This is the only God in the history of the humans' creations of gods that didn't come in like a conquering king who's got all these magical superpowers, but came in with humility and grace and love and lived among us and said, let me show you what the kingdom of God is like. And this is fascinating when it comes to Christmas time, especially because all our gift giving is really an outpouring of our joy in the fact that this child has come into the world. And all of these songs that we sing are magnificent praise of that. And someday, I think we will, little by little, start to understand that the outward expressions of what we do in the name of Jesus are to be mirrored inwardly. It's the joy that we find in ourselves. It's the way that we live our lives, not out of compulsion, but out of joy. It is the way that we are not constantly walking on eggshells because we think there's a God cracking the whip over our shoulders, but rather that we are walking in freedom. My favorite verse in the New Testament says, it is for freedom that Christ set us free. And don't go and be slaves again, I'm paraphrasing. So, it's one of the magnificent moments of Christmas. And I'm with you. I love the secular American Christmas.
Yeah.
I love the joy. And frankly, it's good for the economy. And as somebody who sells furniture, I'm particularly grateful that a lot of people come and buy, reclining chairs at this time. But there's so much more to it, I think, in many ways, that holds the key to the things that tear us up now, to the things about which we disagree, to the things that cause fights and enmities among us. There is this baby who comes into the world barefoot, who comes into the world naked, and as I've said before, is kind of like Billy Jack in the old movies, like right before he was going to accomplish his purpose by kicking some tail, he would take his boots off. And I think that's the way sort of God comes into the world and says, let me show you what kind of kingdom I'm all about. I am going to come looking absolutely vulnerable and being magnificently powerful. And I love you. It's you. And that, to me, captures more than a cathedral, ever could. But I can understand. It's funny because as magnificent as the cathedral and the music seem to us, it is like, I think it was Charles Spurgeon who talked about how we trying to explain God or trying to give form to our appreciation of God are like lisping babies. And we cannot fully grasp the magnificence that not only can be within us now, but will await us in eternity.
Yeah, there's beauty in the effort, though.
No doubt.
It was fortuitous for me to find this, ladies and gentlemen, because I have developed, it's not even a habit, it's just a passion. I'll find something in history that interests me, and I'll read about that. So I'll drill down into history, and then I go horizontal, and I read everything that I possibly can about that kind of thing. And just not too long ago, read a book about the Battle of Agincourt, which led me to a book about the Battle of Poitiers, which led me to a book about the Battle of Crécy, and so on. And all of these gigantic battles in the 100 Years' War, when most of these structures were being constructed. And the thing that's so remarkable about it, and this message is simply for people who may not have any religious feelings. So just bear with me on this, because I was one of you for 55 years. What you find in these battles is that the English told their men that God is on our side, and the French told their men that God is on the English side, told their men that God is on their side too. And therefore they would go and commence to hacking each other to pieces. And when people think about religion, especially Christianity in their darkest sense, all they see is the hacking. But what I think I don't know how else to put this. It's just the second flew into my head. It's not what I was going to say before. But you could think about Christianity really, I think, in the West as like braces for your teeth. And they don't happen immediately. They simply guide and correct over time. And over time, they begin to take a shape that's much better and much more just healthier. So what I'm saying is, if the introduction of Christianity to Europe in the 4th century, 5th century, and climaxed with all of these European wars, nevertheless, that idea of Christianity, that idea of turn the other cheek, that idea of Prince of Peace, that idea of the Golden Rule, if you look at history, you can see that it's just slowly corrected the savagery out of people. Slowly, to the point now where if you saw somebody kicking a dog, you would have that person arrested, and rightfully so. But kicking a dog would be about the nicest thing you would see on the streets in the town of Poitiers in 1362 or something like that. It has corrected us. And the power of this, if you don't have any religious beliefs at all, just consider the power of it as software. Just think of it as software. If you think of humans as hardware, which I think is a pretty good analogy, you can have a child born into a family anywhere, and if that child is adopted at age 2 or 3 days, that child adopts to whatever software he's being fed. So think of it as software. But what does this software actually accomplish? 1,000 years ago, people who lived maybe 25, 30 years old were using wood sticks to plant, skinny corn in the ground, and somehow managed to find the money and the effort, in addition to everything that they had to do in their miserable and short lives, to literally cut leaves out of living stone. You cut vines and leaves out of marble, and it's 50, 60 feet high, and there's no structure on the inside, and these stained glass windows that took generations of work, and all of it. It's all predicated on a belief that we can do things, and that while we're not judged by our good works, that somehow the history of the West to me looks like this. As people became more and more and more corrected by Christianity, they became capable of greater and greater and greater things. And not just greater achievements like the moon landing. I mean, greater kindness. We have no-kill animal shelters. It's an inconceivable idea. Even a generation ago, that's an inconceivable idea, but it's a magnificent idea. And we didn't get there right away. We had to be guided into this position. And watching these choirs at King's Church and looking at the inside of the cathedral and listening to the music that makes up our heritage, our shared heritage in the West, which belongs to anybody, by the way. Anybody who wants to be a part of it can be a part of it. It is not exclusive. It doesn't matter where you're born or what you believe. It is open to everyone. But I watched those, listen to those hymns echo through those stone walls. And I thought, if we detach ourselves from this, we're going to get what we deserve. If we detach ourselves from this taproot of fundamental decency and the entire idea of Christianity being that you do not have to be watched by a slave master because you have an internal conscience within you, you have a spark of divinity within you that knows the difference between right and wrong, that idea is the only idea that allows people to govern themselves. It's simply impossible. It's inconceivable any other way. So I'm not asking you to go out there and convert or anything like that or go to church or anything, but I am asking you to do this. Do not belittle the religious convictions that got us here. These are some of the greatest minds and some of the millions and millions of lives that went into creating a moral cathedral, a church of beliefs that we have inherited. And I want to see that church preserved, and I want to see that internal cathedral not only preserved, but I want to see it enlarged. And I know it's going to take 100 years or 1,000 years before it gets to the next stage, but I want to do my part in making that internal cathedral and this Church of America that we all live in not only survive, but improve. And I think that's my Christmas message to all of you this 2019. Thank you so much for all of you out there who've been our not just our members, but our viewers as well. You've given Stephen Scott and I a kind of life that we never really imagined, and you'll pay for that later when you get to hell. But in all seriousness, thank you. Thank you for everything, and thank you for a wonderful Christmas for all of us, and Merry Christmas to all of you. Whether you believe in Jesus or not, or Santa or not, it belongs to everybody. So Merry Christmas, and we will see you in 2020.